There's a painful pattern I've seen too many times. A family builds wealth over a lifetime, sacrifices, invests, and saves, and they want to pass it on wisely. Studies show that 70% of wealthy families lose their wealth by the second generation, and by the third generation, 90% is gone. And it's not because they didn't have enough money. It's because they didn't have a plan that went beyond the numbers. So here's the mistake that most families make. They treat wealth like a bank account. But real wealth isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's structure, it's clarity, and it's trust. It's conversations, not just documents. And I've worked with families who had millions in assets, but no clarity on what would happen next. No plan for taxes, no strategy for transition, no conversations about values or purpose or legacy. And that's when wealth turns to worry. But I've also seen a different path, a quiet wisdom that the wealthy often follow. They don't obsess over control. They design flexibility. They use the tax code to their advantage, and most importantly, they lead with clarity and not fear. And this video is about that path. In the next few minutes, I'm going to share with you 3 legacy secrets that the wealthy families use to stay rich, and not just for one generation, but across many. Each one is something that I use with my own clients, real people who want to protect what they built and create something meaningful with it. And you don't need to be a billionaire to use these ideas. You just need to care deeply about your family and want to make wise decisions before it's too late. So how do wealthy families keep their momentum and avoid costly mistakes others make? It starts with a surprising truth. Well, they don't sell their way to liquidity, they actually borrow. Secret number 1, how the wealthy access cash without paying taxes. So here's the thing that most people never consider. The wealthy don't sell to get their money, they borrow. And now I know that how that sounds to the average ear, borrowing seems risky and even reckless, but here's the truth. Done right, borrowing is one of the most powerful tax strategies available. So let me give you an example of how this works. Imagine a couple in their early 60s. They've done everything right. They've saved diligently, they've invested wisely, and now they have about $4.5 million in a taxable investment portfolio. So this is just like your normal brokerage account. They are thinking about buying a second home near their grandkids in Arizona, and that place costs about $700,000. They can afford it, but they're stuck. They say, if we sell our investments to buy this house, they realize we'll trigger capital gains, lose out on future growth, and disrupt our whole retirement plan. And they're right. Selling would mean realizing over $500,000 in capital gains potentially for them and paying nearly $120,000 in taxes. And now we have to add that on top of whatever they need. So that's not just a tax hit, that's a permanent setback in their compounding. So instead of selling, they use a strategy more families should understand. They borrow against their investments using a securities-backed line of credit, or SBLOC, also called a pledged asset line of credit, bunch of different names. The loan comes with a modest interest rate, maybe around 5 to 6%, depending on who you go with, and there's no sale, there's no tax bill, and no disruption to your investment strategy. So they get their home, their investments keep growing, and that's the power of tax-efficient liquidity. And this is a strategy used by the wealthiest people in the world. Look at Elon Musk. He borrowed billions against his Tesla shares to buy X, or whatever you want to call it nowadays. Real estate investors pull equity and reinvest without selling. Now, that's a very smart strategy. And then we have private banks who routinely offer these lending strategies tailored to their ultra high net worth clients. And not because they have to, but because it preserves their compounding and avoids unnecessary taxes. So now this doesn't mean borrowing is always the right move. It has to be done thoughtfully. But what I mean is this. If accessing money through borrowing costs less than the taxes you pay to sell, then borrowing may actually be the more conservative option. And it's not about being flashy. It's about preserving the momentum. And here's the difference. The average investor thinks, I need $500,000, what can I sell? The wealthy ask, how can I access $500,000 without disrupting anything? That's what planning is about. Not just building wealth, but knowing how to use it wisely. And that leads us to the second secret the wealthy understand. It's not just about protecting money. It's about protecting your family. And when it comes to family, money without meaning can do more harm than good. And that's why most enduring legacies aren't built on control. They're built on communication, clarity, and trust. And before we move on, I want to give you something that can help you take the next step with clarity. I put together a free estate planning guide. It outlines the key questions that you should be asking and some of the most common mistakes to avoid. Whether you already have a plan or just getting started, this guide can help you protect your family with confidence. Download it in the description below. Now let's talk about how the wealthy use trust not to rule from the grave, but to guide with love. Secret number 2, the legacy blueprint, trust that builds confidence, not control. Most people think trust is cold, controlling legal tools, something rigid, something that's limiting, but here's what the wealthy know. Trusts don't have to be about control. They can be about clarity, values, and even love. Let's say you have a family with 3 adult children. One is a teacher who lives simply, saves diligently. The other one is a free spirit, creative, spontaneous, maybe not the most financially responsible. Third is on a second marriage with kids from a previous relationship. So now imagine you're the parent. You want to be fair, but also wise. Leaving a child with a lump sum may seem clean and simple, but in reality, that could lead to resentment, risk, or even rapid depletion. So instead, this family sets up a values-based discretionary trust. So here's how that would work. Rather than handing everything over at once, the trust allows for structured distributions based not just on age, but on circumstances, behaviors, and even values. And that's not control, that's guidance. That's parenting beyond your lifetime. So here are some types of trusts that may bring this to life. So there's more than one way to create the structure with love. Here are 3 types of trusts that we often use to protect families and guide future generations. Number 1 is a testamentary trust. This is a trust created at your death based on instructions in your will. It allows you to build values-based guidelines inside of it, like funding education or offering milestone-based distributions. It's a powerful option if you want to delay the asset control until you're passing, but still give thoughtful structure on how it's handled. Number 2 is irrevocable trust with value-based guidelines. So this is where things get really personal. An irrevocable trust allows you to set highly customized rules, like paying for education and healthcare with no strings attached, providing home buying funds, but only after the beneficiary completes a financial literacy course, and offering matching grants for charity or entrepreneurship, encouraging purpose, not just consumption, or having it at a designated age where the assets can pass fully to the beneficiary, or even skip a generation if that's more aligned with your vision. And these tools aren't about micromanaging. They're about designing a plan that's wise, flexible, and intentional. And here's where communication becomes essential, because a trust is a document that can outline the mechanics, but it can't explain the why. And that's why we encourage families to write a legacy letter, a personal message that sits alongside those legal documents. And it might say, we created this trust not because we don't trust you, but because we care deeply about how this wealth supports your life. We want it to help you grow, not just to help you spend. And when families pair a legacy letter with the trust, it removes the sting of judgment. It becomes clear that this plan is an act of love, not out of control. And we've also seen how ongoing communication can make or break a legacy. The wealthiest families I work with don't just plan, they hold annual family meetings. And it's not about their asset allocations or stock performance, but it's about their vision. They walk through the estate plan with the next generation. They explain the structure, they invite questions. It's in those meetings where misunderstandings are cleared, assumptions are broken, and unity can be built. Contrast that with a family who never talked about any of this. When the matriarch passed, the children are shocked by how the estate was divided. One felt favored, one felt forgotten, and the result, 2 years of lawsuits and a family that no longer speaks. And the saddest part, it was all avoidable. The documents weren't bad, but the silence was deafening. And the wealthy know documents alone don't protect a family. Clarity does, communication does. Sometimes we even help clients record a video message, a 5-minute explanation of their values, their hopes, and why the plan is structured the way it is. And it's not a legal requirement, but it's a heart requirement. And we also review the trust regularly. As laws and family dynamics change and evolve, as grandchildren are born, it's not just a one and done document. It's a living expression of what matters most. And so when people talk about estate planning, it's not just about who gets what. It's about how that what supports the who and why. So if your estate plan only lives in a drawer, it's a liability waiting to happen. If it lives in your relationships, your words, your shared understanding, then it becomes a legacy. And that's how the wealthy use trusts. They don't just pass on money, they pass on meaning. They don't just transfer assets, they transfer wisdom. And they don't wait until it's too late. They start the conversation now, while they're alive, while they're present, while they can lead with love. And that's the second secret. Trusts aren't about control, they're about care. Now we've seen how structure and clarity can protect relationships. Let's look at how strategy can protect wealth itself. Because even the most thoughtful plan can be undone by one silent threat: estate taxes. And the wealthiest family know how to shift growth out of their estate, and it's something every purposeful planner should understand. Secret number 3, escape the tax trap: how to grow your wealth outside of your estate. So one of the biggest silent threats to your wealth is something most families never see coming, is estate taxes. Especially with those $2 to $10 million in assets, the risk isn't federal tax alone, because you're not at that point. It's the combination of state estate taxes, poor asset location, and failing to plan ahead while you're still alive. So let me paint you a picture. A widow lives in Washington state. Her estate is worth $8 million. She's already done a lot of the right things: created a revocable trust, named beneficiaries, kept her documents up to date. But what she doesn't realize is that Washington has its own estate tax, and the exemption is only $2.193 million, or about $2.2 million. At death, more than $5 million of her estate is going to be taxed, even though there's no federal estate tax that applies here. And the result, hundreds of thousands in unnecessary estate taxes. So what can be done? The answer is what wealth families do all the time. They move future growth out of their estate while they're still alive. So let's break that down to real actionable tools. Number 1, a credit shelter trust, or what's also called AB trust or bypass trust. When the first spouse dies, a portion of their estate is placed into the credit shelter trust, preserving their estate tax exemption and sheltering that portion from tax in the second spouse's estate. Without this, the surviving spouse ends up with all of the assets and all of the tax burden. This one move can double the amount of wealth passed tax-free to the next generation. And a similar trust that can be created inside of a will is called a disclaimer trust, where this can be done at someone's passing. And this is something that I typically look for if you do not have a credit shelter trust already created. Number 2, irrevocable life insurance trust, or ILITs. Most people don't realize that life insurance is taxable in your own estate. Not to the beneficiary, but in your estate, if you own the policy. So by setting up an ILIT, you move the death benefit outside of your estate, ensuring your heirs receive every dollar. And it's one of the simplest ways to transfer wealth efficiently. And number 3, annual gifting strategies. You can give up to $19,000 per person per year in 2025 with no tax consequences. That means a couple with 3 children and 6 grandchildren can move over $171,000 per year outside of their estate just by writing checks. Even better, you could also use those gifts to fund irrevocable trusts that invest and grow outside of your estate. And that growth will never be taxed as part of your net worth. And this is especially important and possible if you want to set up age-based distributions. Number 4, grantor trust and generation skipping trusts. So these are advanced strategies, but incredibly powerful. A grantor trust allows you to pay income taxes on the trust's behalf, effectively growing wealth for your heirs faster. A generation skipping trust allows you to pass wealth to your grandchildren or future heirs without being taxed twice. So once at your level, and then once again at your children's level. So imagine passing $3 million to your grandchildren and saving over $1 million in taxes, just through intentional structure. Not saying that's what's going to happen to you, but that is a possibility for some families. And remember, these strategies only work when you plan ahead. You can't set up a credit shelter trust after someone dies. You can't build an ILIT retroactively. You can't take advantage of gifting if you wait until the last few years of your life. And the wealthy know this. That's why they start shifting assets early. Not because they're greedy, but because they understand the rules and they use them to protect the people that they love. So here's the bottom line. It's not about avoiding taxes just for the sake of it. It's about keeping your money in your family instead of sending it to the government by default. And if you're not planning for this, it's just a missed opportunity. It's a silent loss that could take a lifetime of careful saving and cut it down by 10 to 20 or even 30%. So ask yourself, have you looked at what would happen to your estate under current law? Are you planning what happens next if the estate tax exemption drops in 2026? Have you started shifting any growth out of your name and into a protected structure? And if not, now's the time to think about it. Because once that window closes, it doesn't come back. So by now you've seen what most families miss. The wealthy don't stay wealthy by accident. They make intentional choices about how they access money, how they protect their family, and how they prepare for what's next. But what's most important isn't the tools. It's actually the mindset. Because at the end of the day, estate planning isn't about control. Tax planning isn't about greed. And wealth isn't about numbers. It's about meaning. It's about peace. It's about knowing what you built won't turn into a burden the moment you're gone. The biggest risk isn't market volatility. It's actually silence, confusion. It's your loved ones trying to make sense of your plan without ever hearing your voice in it. But that can be different. You don't need to have every answer. You just need to have the willingness to start the conversation. And that's the gift the wealthiest families leave behind. Not just money, but structure. Not just trust accounts, but actual trust. So if this stirred something in you, pause before you move on. Ask yourself, does my current estate plan reflect what I actually want? And will it protect the people that I love in the way that they deserve? If not, there's still time to change it, because that's the beautiful part. Because legacy isn't what happens when you die. It's how you live right now with intention. The real impact comes from taking the next step. If today's ideas sparked questions or even gave you a little clarity, I invite you to download the estate planning guide below. It's free, it's practical, and it could help you avoid the very mistakes that cause the 90% of wealth to disappear by the 3rd generation. So this is how we turn good intentions into lasting outcomes. Subscribe for more.